Are you ready to start our
Oh,
series on the deeper work approach to intuitive eating?
I am more than ready. I am so pumped for this. I've been excited for this series since we decided to do it.
Yeah, I love the intuitive eating principles. I mean, what an incredible body of work from Evelyn Triboli and Elise Resch.
Mhm.
We are always so honored to utilize her work in our work, and we are thrilled to be adding our deeper work, really getting down to the
Yeah.
psychological roots,
Mhm.
connecting the dots to really what's underneath, how your psyche works in all sorts of different ways that seem completely abstract, but when you tease it apart and you put it back together again, it makes complete and total sense
Yeah.
why it's so easy to fall prey to things like dieting and why it's so disruptive for your psyche.
And the piece that I'm really excited about with this series is we're going to really unpack a lot of the nuances, the emotional and psychological nuances that intuitive eating is predicated on.
Mhm.
And these nuances are so important,
Mhm.
and they can trip people up so quickly and can create a sense of overwhelm or failure and like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And then, kind of sending people back to diets.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times in our office do we, talk with people about intuitive eating
Mhm.
and they say, yeah, it makes sense. I like the concept, but I just don't know how to do it, or I tried and it didn't work for
Yeah.
me. It's really complicated. It sounds very simple, but it
Yeah.
is really complicated from that emotional, psychological perspective.
Yeah. I think it's complicated, and we're going to spend today going through this in detail, but it's complicated because it takes people out of this follow this
Mhm.
external instruction sheet
Yeah.
of exactly what to do,
Yeah.
right? A, B plus C equals D, and you will
Mhm.
get, this end result, right? And intuitive eating says, well, we know that even though that equation seems to make sense, it
Right.
never works,
Mhm.
right? It fails 95% of the time. And the solution is to come back to yourself,
Mm.
right? In this beautiful, accurate, intuitive way.
Mm.
But it's so unfamiliar for
Mm.
people because many, many times from the start, they have been taught don't listen to
Right.
yourself,
Mhm.
right? Don't have this feeling. A good girl is supposed to feel this way, Don't express this need. You really need to be doing this. So we very quickly in
Yeah.
life get socialized
Mhm.
away from our intuition. And dieting, as we're going to go into in a minute, is really one of those pervasive
Mhm.
and concrete ways that says this external way is the better way to go. You can't trust yourself.
That's right.
So when we ask people to go back to intuitive eating, it's very disruptive and
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense. But instead of abandoning that process, we need to say, hang in there, work on fine tuning it. And ultimately, it's not just about intuitive eating, it's
Mhm.
about
Intuition.
yeah.
You said my favorite word, Dr. Julie. It's so interesting because intuitive eating, and I said this actually in my most recent Recovery Hacks episode, that when we talk about intuitive eating, whether I'm talking about this with a client or in our wonderful community or elsewhere, people go to the second word of eating. And they start thinking about, okay, so what should I eat? And how should I eat it? And when should I eat it? And how do I listen to my body relative to what I eat? And, those are questions that we can look at, but I like to slow people down. Like, hold on, there was a really, really, really important word before that second word, and it's intuitive. And to get to intuitive eating, you have to get to the intuitive aspect of learning how to live from that place of intuition. And intuition is where the answers are within you. And so, like you just said, if you've been socialized, which I think a lot of us
I
are
think everybody,
growing
I
up,
think pretty much everybody is. Okay.
right? Especially as kids. I
Mhm.
mean, in very just kind of mundane ways,
Mhm.
adults can pull kids away from themselves. It's not time to eat.
Right.
When we go over to grandma's house today, make sure you act
Right.
nice.
You can't be hungry. You just ate, you know?
One of my favorites. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or there's no way you're feeling that. They didn't mean that. Don't be this. So I think we get messages very, very early on that say, you actually don't know what's going on
Right.
inside. I know better
Yeah.
than you what's going on inside
Yeah.
of you. And so it makes sense if that is a lot of how we get socialized, which I think you're right, most, if not all of us do to some degree. It makes sense then that we're going to go into adulthood and say, well, I must not have the answers within. They must be outside of me. And let's
Right.
face it, we have to interact with food probably more than most things in our
Mhm.
life, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense that this is going to be an area where that lack of connection to your intuition is going to play out a lot. A lot of energy is going to get put into looking for those answers outside of you. And diets are like, hey, I've got all the answers. Not only do I have answers, but I have guarantees. If
Yeah.
you do this, you're going to get this sparkly outcome.
Yeah. Because you can't really trust yourself.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So I think the message over and over and over again is, you know, if you are left to your own devices, you're going to be out of control. If
Yeah.
you're left to your own devices, you're going to pick, the wrong
It's gonna be
foods,
bad.
or it's going to be bad, or your body is going to go out of control.
Mhm.
So you don't have the answers inside of yourself. You can't trust yourself. Instead, you need to then focus on something that is external, that knows better, and you just have to be disciplined enough, practice enough willpower, and then you're going to be successful.
Oh, you're
So,
saying like all the words that are like nails on chalkboard for me.
well, and I think, I am, and this,
I know,
purposefully
yeah.
saying these words because I think that people get brainwashed and they believe it. They really believe that I don't have willpower. I don't have control. If I'm left to my own devices again, I am going to be led astray. And so when we talk with our clients about intuitive eating, and we talk about, of course, coming back to yourself and your intuition, I think what happens for most people is that it is so unsettling.
Yeah.
Because they
Terrifying.
feel, right, this lack of trust within themselves and a lack of knowing, because ultimately they have become disconnected from themselves. So, I think that that's why it makes these wonderful principles so difficult.
Yes.
And so one of the things that we want to do in this videocast series is we want to increase your awareness regarding this process, the things that cause you to stumble, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because of these processes. And we want to help, again, to connect the dots and to say, please try. Grapple with this, because the retrusting process is a process of trial and error. Okay. And it is not going to happen right away.
No.
And it is okay if you feel that kind of terror that Dr. Ashley was just feeling inside of herself, that's normal, but that's not a reason to abandon the intuitive eating. Okay. You have to stay in this unsettled space for quite some time, and to know and to have faith that ultimately you will come to trust yourself and you become reconnected to the answers that are within us all.
And I think staying within that really uncomfortable gray area of kind of grappling inside and even trusting what we're saying to trust the process, it's very uncertain. You don't know where this is going to take you. And I think one of the most appealing things about diets at the outset of starting one is you really do get that shiny guarantee that if you do this and you do this and you do this and you do it perfectly, then you will get this shiny thing, right? Which is weight loss, health, whatever the promoted thing is. And when we come back to our intuition and we choose to be intuitive beings, whether that's in our eating, in our feeling, in our movement, there's so many areas of life. We were saying, intuitive eating is a microcosm of intuitive living.
Right.
What you have to do to become an intuitive eater is really what you have to do to become an intuitive liver and being. And so I think, you don't get a guarantee. You don't know where this is going to take you. And that can be a really scary prospect, to not know what it's going to look like, right? And becoming an intuitive person and an intuitive eater is really about being able to be in the moment and kind of stay really attuned and aware of what's happening inside of you right now. What are you needing right now, without knowing where that's going to take you or what it's going to look like. But here's the beautiful thing: when you're connected to your intuition, is you do trust that wherever it's going to take you is going to be the right space for you, right? Your intuition does not lead you astray.
No, it doesn't. I think you come to trust that.
Yeah, through grappling.
Through, and through blind faith following, right? So when you then follow it, and then you recognize that over and over and over again, your intuition will always lead you to the right place. It might not be the place that you thought you were going to end up with at the beginning, but it will always lead you to that right place. And so then you develop that trust, but it's only through, really going in with blind faith.
Okay? And doing it.
And doing it. Yeah, absolutely. So intuition, you're right. This is intuitive eating, and looking at this, it really is a microcosm for this overall concept of intuition. And, intuition, we think about kind of like that gut sense of things, mostly when we think about intuition. But I think it's also important to look at intuition as a little bit more concrete, that it's the internal signals. Okay. And those signals might be something like hunger and fullness. Okay. It might be anxiety that says that somebody doesn't feel safe, or you're walking in a parking lot, and it just doesn't feel right. You want to listen to that intuition. Okay. It might be a feeling of excitement or enthusiasm for, let's say, a career area, okay, that then you want to follow instead of maybe going to law school. Sorry, lawyers out there. Or if you are a lawyer and you love being a lawyer, then you knew that excitement to be a lawyer, and you chose that because you didn't want to be, I don't know, a dog trainer or something. So it really is, and I guess I just offer that because I think that if we can make it more concrete, it's less amorphous for people, right? So there are those signals that we have to recognize as valuable and trust it, and say that those are parts of our inner self that are pointing us in the right direction.
Really wise parts, maybe add. Really wise parts.
Yep.
I would say another concrete aspect of intuition, I really like what you're saying, Dr. Julie, is, intuition is really rooted in our senses and in our feelings.
Okay.
It's not rooted in our logic. And so a lot of times where people can get tripped up with their intuition is they don't understand why they're getting the sensory signals, why the hair on the back of their neck is standing up, or why they're feeling anxious. And so too often when we don't understand why, then we disregard it. And learning how to be an intuitive being and an intuitive eater is saying, even when I don't understand why, I choose to listen and trust. Right? So when that emotion comes up and I don't know why, I will follow it. I will allow it to guide me, because you know what? In doing that, guess what happens? It makes sense.
Right.
The knowing comes, but the knowing often is not the first point. And so that's another concrete part of becoming in touch with your intuition, is knowing how it works. And I think it was the book Blink, where they talk about intuition and how there's this rapid fire sensory intake that our brain processes faster than our logical brain. And that's what that intuition is. And it's okay to trust it even when you don't understand it.
Yeah. And it's actually important to trust it as opposed to overriding it with the logic. Because a lot of times we do override it with logic. And that doesn't mean that we don't ever use logic in decision-making processes. But when we're talking about getting a gut feeling, and the reason why we're really emphasizing this is because, to me, it gives you a little bit more of a sense of control.
Right.
This intuition can, again, be this amorphous kind of process, especially for people that have never been given the gift of encouragement to connect to and listen to yourself. So this is more of that, less kind of unknown, and it's more of like connect to those bodily signals, pay attention, trust, and then follow it with a leap of faith, as opposed to overriding it, questioning it, shoulding it, invalidating it. And it will, in fact, lead you to the right place, and you will learn to trust that more and more the more you do it in every area of your life.
Yeah, I think if we bring this back to the issue around eating, if you get that hunger cue and you make the conscious choice to listen to those signals, and your logical brain says, but you just ate 2 hours ago, so you shouldn't be hungry. And if we think back to those early life experiences where we got pulled away from our intuition, does that sound like anyone from your past who would say, well, you shouldn't be hungry, I just fed you 2 hours ago? If you choose to trust those signals and you say, well, my logical brain says I shouldn't be hungry, my body's saying it is, I'm going to try something different, I'm going to feed myself and see what happens, I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised that the more you practice that, the more you realize your body is so smart, so much smarter than any diet, any plan, any program, any expert. Nobody knows your body, your emotions, your thoughts, and your needs better than you. And I'm so sorry that early on in life, you were led to believe that somebody knew better, but they don't.
They don't. You are your own ultimate wisdom. Okay. Yourself, your psyche is your wise advisor. Okay. Never give that role to anybody else or believe that they know better than you. No diet, no individual. Okay. You are the ultimate wisdom over your needs and yourself. Really important.
Yeah.
Really
I would love to propose like maybe another title to this principle, right?
Okay.
So Evelyn and Elise have the principle called Reject the Diet Mentality. And I'm going to propose another title, which is Reject the Answers Outside of You. Right? Whether this is in what you should eat, whether this is in what career you should pursue, whether this is in what you should do this weekend,
what you should be feeling, who you should love, right?
Yeah. Reject the answers outside of you and come within and spend some quiet, meaningful time with yourself in whatever form that is for you. And ask, your intuition to give you some input, and it will, and it will guide you on the path that is right for you. Always.
I love it. It's beautiful.
So maybe we'll have our own little deeper work names as we go through these.
Well, we know that there's some of that writing in the works, right? So Okay, so we've just been talking about kind of intuitive eating and teasing out this wonderful primary word, intuitive or intuition, starting to talk about the reject the dieting mentality. Now, it is important to understand the nuts and bolts of the research and why that is so important for your psyche to let go of this chronic dieting. Dr. Ashley, in her recovery hacks, has addressed that in the past week. I did a Mission Monday, Dr. Julie, actually a couple of them in preparation, talking about all sorts of diet statistics and the multi-billion-dollar diet industry that really tries to sell you a bill of sales, and really looking at that for all the reasons why it is so important. So we're not going to go over that today. We're going to focus on some other kind of aspects. And what I would like to talk about, is this trap that so many people get caught up in with dieting. I think that number one, it gives them the sense that someone else knows something better than you do.
Right.
We've been talking about that with the intuition outside of yourself, which is really, not an oxymoron, but it's is that, I guess we would call it, I guess we would call it an oxymoron. But the other, is that so many times when you are experiencing a lack of control within yourself or within your world, right? Like that's disruptive to us all. We all need to feel like we are able to have control over something. So if for some reason you are not experiencing that within yourself, or your psychological self does not feel like you ultimately have empowerment or control within your world, guess what? It is going to desperately need something to feel like I've got to focus on something that gives me a sense of control. Okay. And for a lot of people, it is, I'm going to go on this diet. I'm going to focus on it. I'm going to go from all of the, black and white kind of instructions and the point A to point Z. And then I'm going to lose this weight, and it's going to give me this promised sense of control.
And happiness and fulfillment.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So I encourage you to think about that. Think about the times when you decide that you're going to go on a diet, like maybe that's when you're at the beginning of a romantic relationship, right? And you feel completely vulnerable and, you're risking your heart, and it's just like, oh my gosh, you just feel so out of control. And what do? You say, I'm going to go on a diet
to get some control.
Okay. I'm going to focus on something and I'm going to give myself some control. Okay. If something's going on, let's say, in your family, maybe your children are having a lot of struggles that you're not able to help them with, you feel a lack of control. Guess what? I just heard this diet. I think I'm going to go on this diet. All right. You're in graduate school and you feel completely overwhelmed. Guess what? That sounds like a great time to go on a diet. Okay. So I want you to look at your history, or maybe what's going on currently, and say, what was the impetus? What was the underlying impetus for me to go on a diet at that time, right? Like, I mean, if you ask yourself kind of on the surface level, you'll say, oh, well, I'm going to a party on Saturday night and I need to fit into those jeans, or I'm going to, I don't know, Bora Bora over like the holidays.
Ooh, I like that.
And I need to do this. But I bet you that there is probably a sense of lack of control elsewhere. And diets promise that. Okay. Do this in 7 days. This is going to be different. Okay. Order this food and just kind of do this, and you will feel in control. So I think that that's important that we look at that.
Yeah.
Okay?
I also think that diets can come in when there's a lack of control and I think these two things tend to go together, when there is like a lack of fulfillment or a lack of joy or satisfaction in the big realms of your life. So if your career is feeling unfulfilling, if home life is feeling chaotic or disconnected or unfulfilling, if your friends are off living these great lives and you're just like back over here not living a great life, I think I think all of that can breed a sense of feeling out of control, like you can't really change this. Maybe you feel stuck. I
Mhm.
also think it can just breed a sense of emptiness,
Mhm.
a very lackluster feeling. And again, those shiny promises
Yeah.
that diets sell you are super appealing
Right.
when other areas of life are really dull, or at
Right.
least feel really dull.
Yeah.
And, when there has been kind of these earlier life experiences where you kind of learned within yourself that maybe you can't create a lot of change, you're impotent in those ways of really creating the life that you want, you may go sideways to a diet. Well,
Right.
I can't really do anything about my job, or I can't really
Right.
do anything about my marriage, but I can do
Mhm.
something about my health and my weight.
Mhm.
And I think diets give that really false sense
Mhm.
of control
Right.
and false sense of fulfillment,
Right.
um, in promising, this wonderful life. If you
Right.
could just get to that elusive finish
Right.
line, which
Right.
we all know is
Right.
not really there.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
So, when I work with clients with eating issues and eating disorders, whether it is on one end of the spectrum with emotional eating and binge eating, all the way to the other end of the spectrum with anorexia and everything in
Hmm.
between, you know, I know that if their life does not have real healthy control, okay, and I'll explain that in a minute, but if they don't have that sense, and then I propose to them that they let go of their eating behavior, whatever
Whatever it
crazy
is.
behavior, and I say crazy, just lovingly. I know that
Yeah.
that's a survival technique when you're in that space, but if I ask to take away the oxygen of what's giving you a sense of control to survive life that you have no sense of empowerment or control over, there is no way
Mhm.
that that is going to be effective.
Not
Okay.
only give it up, but then like walk into this like gray area,
Of
amorphous intuition. Like,
right,
what are
right.
you talking
The,
about?
it is not going to happen.
Right.
And then a client can say, oh my gosh, I really wanted to do it, but then I
Yeah.
went out on my own, I wasn't able to do it. They just feel like I have failed, right?
Mhm.
Which is just so disheartening. So we always have to start with a foundation of, you know do you feel a healthy sense of empowerment and control in your life? And that doesn't mean that life works perfectly, but it means that you give yourself permission to step in and respond to your feelings and your needs, or what you want your
Mhm.
life to look like.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that will give your psyche a true sense of control, which then allows it to be taken back from your relationship with food or the next diet that
Mhm.
is giving you this pseudo sense of control. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we work on things like, do you speak up and use your
Mhm.
voice?
Mhm.
Are you really doing in life what you want to be doing? Are you living from your real self, or are you living this false self that everyone else wants you to be? Okay.
Which, if I can piggyback onto our people pleasing series, right? Living
Yes.
from false self is another form of
Right.
rescuing,
Yeah.
right? Pursuing the career that dad wants you to pursue and not
Yeah.
listening to that intuitive call inside of you
Right.
to do something different,
Yeah.
right?
So even if you're doing that and life looks
Mm-hmm.
perfect, right? You've got financial
Mm-hmm.
security, you're,
Mm-hmm. Big letters
married,
after your
yeah,
name.
you're married, and all this stuff, but it's not your life. It's not the life that makes you feel happy. Your psyche is going to feel a complete lack of control, and it is going to look for some way to get a sense of control. And if you have some of these other kind of predisposing factors for an eating disorder, or if you live in a culture that supports dieting and this is like the next kind of quick fix to be in control, which is pretty much about everywhere, your psyche is going to hang on to that next best diet.
That's right.
Okay. So before you can let go of the dieting mentality, because so many times our clients get disrupted, like they're like, are
Yes.
you kidding me? Like, intellectually I can know, but that diet has promised so much, and that diet, at least initially, makes me feel so good because it gives me the illusion of having control, right?
And they illuminate the path, right? They say, do this and then
Yep.
do this and eat this and take this supplement and work out on this day.
Right.
So they illuminate the path
Right.
and don't leave any question marks, which at the outset can be very comforting,
Yes.
but then becomes very oppressive because it's not fitting day in and day out
Yeah.
with what you're actually wanting and needing.
Yeah. And you will ultimately fail, not because there's anything wrong with you, but because diets for anybody set you up to fail. Nobody can maintain that. To me, what that says is that the psyche is not meant to operate based on external structure. That's why 95% of people fail at maintaining a diet. 95%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing else can get away with that kind of failure rate and still be touted as like the next best thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all of this points to, we have to come back to our intuitive self. We can make it concrete, like we've talked about, right? So it doesn't have to seem so overwhelming, like what? Okay. So it's being connected to yourself. You guys have heard this before, right? Recognizing what the feelings are, or at least what the internal somatic states are, and then putting a feeling on that somatic state, and then asking, what do I need to do to support myself? What do I need to do to listen to myself? And if you step in and you listen to yourself, that message to your psyche is, I'm in control. Okay. I am empowered. My life is mine. And guess what? Then you don't have to do things like be on chronic diets to try to get that sense of control every Monday morning, right? So that's really an important concept.
Yeah. And I think there's good news and bad news in what you're saying. I think the bad news is we all have a responsibility to be really deeply connected with ourselves. And, the work is internal. There is never going to be a diet or a plan or a program that's going to pull you out of this.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
That's a fantasy and it's an illusion, and it's fun at the beginning to play along with that fantasy, but we all know it's just that. So the bad news is it is on our shoulders, each and every one of us, to rescue ourselves, to go back to our people-pleasing series. The good news, guys, is it's only on our shoulders to rescue ourselves. And that means we don't have to rely on anybody else or anything else. No diet, no plan, no program, no supplement, no food, no anything to be successful with this work. It is entirely within your control. And I know right now, some of you might be thinking, oh, lady, you have no idea. There's no way I can do this. My body's broken. It betrays me. It doesn't work right. I get it. And I promise you, it really is all within you already. In one of my recovery hacks, they talked about your intuition is like the blue sky. It's always there. And right now, when you're caught up in diet culture, you've got rain clouds covering it up. And those rain clouds kind of convince you that that's all that's up there in the sky. You don't realize that there's a blue sky behind those rain clouds. So what we're talking about is clearing out those rain clouds and realizing that that's not all that there is. The blue sky has been there all along. That intuition, the answers within you have been there all along. And you have not only the power, but the ability to connect back up with that part of you and start to cultivate a trusting relationship, right? And nobody else can take that away from you. And to me, that's like the most hopeful piece is I don't need anybody else to make this happen. Do I need support, and do I need education, and do I need my cheerleaders, to help me through? Absolutely. But when it comes down to really getting into an intuitive place where this is how I choose to live, only I get to make that happen for me. And I just think that's like the most beautiful part of this process.
No, it is beautiful. It's like no one else can let you down. Okay. And like Dr. Ashley said, there's good news and there's bad news here, and because a lot of times we can let ourselves down, right? And that's the ultimate space of feeling a lack of control. Okay. But you have the power to change that. And that is where some healing comes in. If you've had a history where you were let down, you don't trust yourself, you can step into that place and step up
Mhm.
to saying, I'm going to be connected to myself. I'm going to listen to what my intuition is telling me. And then I'm going to step in and I'm going to risk to support myself. Okay. And that ultimately gives your psyche that sense of empowerment
Mhm.
and being in control.
Mhm.
And that ultimately is the way to create the life that you want,
Mhm.
piece by piece by piece, area by area by area, whether we're
Mhm.
talking career or we're talking about how you treat your body self, or we're talking about where you go on vacation, come March.
Mhm.
All of those things are beautifully within your control if you step into the driver's seat. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's such an important thing.
Yeah.
Our third concept, and a lot of these concepts are overlapping
Yeah.
as we're discussing it in narrative form, but our third concept for why it's so hard to get let go of the dieting
Mhm.
mentality is because so many times there is that fantasy,
Mhm.
that, if I'm not liking myself or I'm not liking my life or I feel unlovable, I'm going to go on this diet and it's going to fix it.
Mhm.
And therefore, it's going to fix my body self. It's going to then create this wonderful life that I really, really want. Okay. And
People are
it's
going to like me better and treat me better.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
All of that from this diet that's been promised, it's going to be this panacea for this wonderful life. And, the really bad news is that's not going to happen. And even people who have successfully lost weight, whether it's through dieting or other mechanisms, I guarantee they will tell you it does not change their life. Okay. It might change how they walk around in their body. Okay. Based on their physical self. It does not make their life better. The only thing that will make your life better is coming back to self and doing the work to step in and be your own cheerleader, to be your own advocate, to listen to your needs and to grapple with the process until you learn how to master it.
Yeah.
Not perfectly, and mastery is not a static term, right? It means that you learn the process of listening to yourself, trusting that you're going to step up in for yourself, and then you're going to do what needs to happen to have the outcome that yourself is asking you for.
Mm.
Okay. And that will make happiness happen. Okay. It just does.
It does. And it does take a lot of, I'm not even going to call it practice. It just takes a lot of doing and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
experiencing to fine tune this. I think, we're both intuitive eaters and we're
Mm-hmm.
constantly just fine tuning that process within ourselves. And it is an ever changing process too. What my body needs today is different than
Yeah.
what it needed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so my task is to stay attuned to that
Yes.
and then respond accordingly. So,
Mhm.
I kind of liken it to if you're in a noisy restaurant and you're with your best friend and you're trying to have a conversation, you have to really dial into what they're saying because
Mhm.
there's so much noise around you. And at first, it might be very distracting to have all that noise going on around you. And think of this like the diet culture noise
Mhm.
around food and what you should do and eat and look and all of that stuff. But the more that you kind of just stay really engaged in this conversation with your friend, which I think of as like these intuitive signals coming from within, the more that you really are better able at tuning out the noise around you. And you can hear that conversation and it gets easier and easier to the point you don't even realize the noise going on around you. So you can get there, and it's just going to take doing and doing and doing and falling down and getting back up. There are so many times that I eat a meal and I was like, oh, I think I ate too much. Maybe I didn't catch those signals quickly enough,
Mhm.
or oops, I didn't eat in time and now I'm too hungry,
Mhm.
or oh, I
Sure.
thought that would feel good in my body, but it didn't.
Mhm.
So intuitive eating is going to be about letting things be imperfect
Mhm.
and messy and not black and white,
Right.
And rejecting the diet mentality is really saying, I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
I can live within that kind of imperfect, messy,
Mhm.
gray area that is both intuitive and uncertain,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah, yeah.
but very empowering.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is so important that because I think people want to arrive at this. It's kind of funny, like this perfect intuitive process, and you know, it's never going to be perfect. Nothing is ever perfect,
Mhm.
right? It's that commitment to say, I'm going to tune into myself.
Mhm.
I am going to, for the most part. I mean, come on, there are definitely times when I eat the chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream when like I'm not physically hungry for it,
Right.
and it's
Got you.
just like, you know what? I just want to eat this and it is what it is. And that's perfectly fine, and there's times when it's like, all right, do I want this or do I want that? And I don't know that perfectly.
Mhm.
But the process is I'm going to try to return to self, that I am not going to hand over the trust of myself,
Mhm.
my future, my life to anything outside of myself. Like I'm just not going to do that.
My
Okay.
happiness.
Or my happiness,
Yeah,
right?
you won't hand it
I'm
over.
just not going to do that. And I'm not going to listen to anybody else's promise that they're going to make it happen for me. Okay. Because it doesn't happen that way. The only one that steers your ship towards happiness is yourself. And that's the bottom line. And when I'm saying that, there's probably a lot of loss associated with that.
Yeah.
Okay. My Mission Monday was really about, some of the loss of giving up this fantasy, this easy fantasy that, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to listen to this doctor, or I'm going to like listen to whatever that then is going to do it for me and give me this life that I am so longing for. And the answer to that is, I'm sorry, that is just not going to happen.
Mm.
And your life is not magically going to get better because of any diet or any external outcome.
Yeah.
So that's the bad news or the sad news. And it's important to grieve that. The beautiful thing is that you can find happiness, but it's going to be found going down a different path.
And you know what? I think happiness, this is going to sound strange if, kind of this emotional awakening is just starting to happen. But it's so true that happiness is actually found in the journey through some of the less than happy emotions. Don't
Mm-hmm.
you think?
Yeah. Yep.
It's not like we go through all the muck and then we get to happiness. We go through the muck and we have experiences of, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, look at that. I'm processing through things and I'm feeling more connected and I'm feeling more empowered. And those are all the bits and pieces that add up to happiness.
Right.
The only way to acquire them is to go through the less than happy feelings and processes and experiences. So it's in the journey. And this is part of the human process, is going through pain, going through grief, really allowing ourselves to open up to the reality of how life works, not the fantasy of how we wish it would work.
And not the quick fix. Okay.
Yeah.
By definition, journey takes time. Okay. So and the journey is a beautiful journey. It is part of life. It is part of your life. Okay. It is part of what you go through to be who you are, and then to get to wherever you're at with all of the memories of the process. Okay, that's who you are. That is your life. And there's no shortcut for that. Okay. And there shouldn't be, because life is in the doing. Okay. And creating a life that feels meaningful and purposeful and happy is in the doing. And that is kind
And
of
in
a
the struggle.
constant, and it's a constant reevaluation. So just like every day, when you say, what am I hungry for? What do I need? What do I want to have later on for dinner? Hopefully close to dinner, so you know what you're hungry for. It's the same thing with life. Whether it's, what do I want to do this weekend, or what do I want to achieve this year, or what's the next place that I want to explore, or let me evaluate what's making me happy or not. Okay.
Sounds like some big picture questions of what am I hungry for?
I
Right?
love it. I love it. So it's all coming back to self in not a quick fix way. And I actually get excited when I talk about this. It's like you couldn't pay me to have someone else do the journey for
No
me.
way.
Okay.
That's
So
where the magic of life happens.
it is. And I can only say that, and Dr. Ashley can only say this because we have risked to go blindly into this space, where at the beginning it's like, oh my gosh, you're kidding me. I have to go there.
You want me to what?
Yeah. And we've done it so many times that we completely trust that process. So where you're at very likely right now, whether we're talking about going into intuitive eating, or we're talking about going into intuitive feeling, or we're talking about going into intuitive living, right? Is to blindly hand yourself over and recognize that part of that process is going to be anxiety.
Yeah.
It's going to feel like I don't know how to do this. I'm overwhelmed by that. And this is all normal because it's new and you don't yet have the trust in the process or the skills. That will come in the doing. And again, the beautiful parts of living happen in the walking through the unknown.
They happen in the free fall. Yeah. When you decide to step into intuition.
Yeah.
You don't free fall forever.
Yeah. So the bad news is there's no quick fix. The beautiful news is there's no quick fix.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can get there. And this again is a microcosm. As you let go of the dieting mentality, we're saying let go of this illusion that someone else is going to have a better answer than you do, because they don't. Okay. And let go of the thought that it's going to be easy, right? And finite start and finish, right? It's not. Okay.
But it's worth it.
And embrace that it's your journey to own.
Yeah.
And that you've got this.
Totally.
Okay. You've got this. And my gosh, please step forward so you can start proving this to yourself piece by piece by piece, so you can feel empowered and feel a healthy sense of control over your life. And then you're going to look back and laugh that you thought a 7-day diet
was going to be the answer
and needed to give yourself the sense of control. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
So this is why we love what we do.
This is the deeper work of intuitive eating. And leave it to us to take principle number 1, reject the diet mentality, to this amazing existential space, right? Because this really is what the deeper work of intuitive eating and intuitive living is all about. And it is complicated. And I hope that this conversation really validates that for you, because while these principles are simple in concept, they are very, very deep. They hit on deep core spaces inside of us that have been harmed along the way by other messages. And so I really hope that you feel validated and reignited to start to connect back up with your intuition and to allow yourself to be the guide, because I promise you it will take you to the most magnificent places you can't even imagine right now. So trust it and allow it to unfold.
What we're talking about is really what eating disorder recovery is all about. Okay. And how beautiful that we can use this wonderful catalyst of the intuitive eating principles and then be able to say, okay, once we let go of this craziness that's promising your psyche all of these things that you have deficiencies currently for, right? And if you learn how to do this for yourself, guess what? You're creating an eating disorder resistant foundation. That's why we say full recovery is absolutely possible. Because if you are able to get down to the deeper work, to these very roots that Dr. Ashley and I are talking about, and you create a real healthy psychological self from the inside out, you're not going to need to struggle with food ever again. Ever again. And that's what our work is all about.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. That
I
is
feel like so fulfilled right now having
Oh,
this conversation. And
yeah.
I really hope that it's touching all of you who are listening.
Yeah.
It is just a tremendously beautiful space to be in when you can be with yourself and trust yourself. And I
Yeah.
wish that for every single person watching this.
Yeah. We love what we do. And we just love kind of, I don't know.
Sharing it.
Yeah, we love sharing it. So thank you guys, because you're here and it allows us to share these pieces of our heart with you, pieces of a journey that we value so very much, live every day ourselves, and really feel very honored to help our clients and now the world with. It's really a very special thing.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for letting us be on this journey with you.
okay, so that is
Yay.
principle number 1. We look forward to your feedback and to your questions. That is so wonderful when we can answer whatever questions you have related to either these concepts or other things regarding the work that we are doing, the deeper work for emotional and binge eating. So we will have a Q&A next week. And look forward to principle number 2 during our next educational video cast.
Perfect. Okay.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Take care.